ABC General Hospital spoilers for the week of March 30, April 3 reveal that a child can destroy an empire of lies faster than any enemy because a child does not need proof to feel that something is wrong. In Port Charles, where adults survive by twisting truth into something convenient, that kind of instinct is more dangerous than a weapon. Behind the closed doors of one house, care has already become control, medicine has become manipulation, and love has taken on the cold shape of possession. In another corner of the city, a confession meant to protect a boy is about to ruin the life of the man who made it and poison the heart of the one he tried to save. Elsewhere, death is preparing to turn grief into revenge, suspicion into war, and old reputations into fresh ammunition. And amid all of that darkness, one couple is trying to build a family around a vulnerable child, only to discover that hope can be terrifying when the world around them keeps proving that nothing stays safe for long. Port Charles is moving toward another explosion, but this time the deepest damage will not come from gunfire or arrest records. It will come from the moment every lie begins collapsing at once, forcing each person to face who they have become in the name of love, fear, loyalty, and survival. Willow had already gone too far before she fully admitted it to herself. At first, her behavior could still be dressed up as concern. She could tell herself she was helping Drew, stabilizing him, protecting him from his own emotional chaos. She could stand in the kitchen with a calm face and steady hands and play the role of the devoted woman caring more than anyone realized. That image made everything easier. It gave her moral cover. The medication she gave Drew did not feel monstrous in the beginning. It felt like a small adjustment, a way to soften his moods, quiet his volatility, and keep their life from falling apart. But once she felt the effect of that control, once she saw how much easier he became to manage when his mind moved through the world a little more slowly, Willow crossed into a psychological space she could no longer leave. She stopped treating Drew like a partner and started treating him like someone whose reality needed to be managed for his own good. That was the lie at the center of everything. Willow no longer believed she was deceiving him. She believed she was preserving him, and that belief turned her into something far more dangerous than a woman acting out of simple malice. She became a woman who believed she had earned the right to decide what another person should feel, know, and remember. The one variable she failed to calculate was Scout. Children always see more than adults allow for, especially when they live inside the tension adults are trying to hide. Scout did not have the language to explain what she was noticing, but she could feel the wrongness in the house. Drew did not seem like himself. He was slower, duller, less present. Willow's smile seemed tighter whenever his condition came up. Too ready, too practiced, too careful. The air in the house felt heavy in a way that made Scout uneasy. Her worry did not come from rebellion or nosiness. It came from love and fear. She missed the version of Drew she recognized, and that longing sharpened her attention. She began watching more closely, listening from the hallway, noticing bottles, labels, routines, patterns. What made the situation more volatile was that Willow began to understand Scout was watching. Once that happened, the dynamic changed completely. Willow was no longer just controlling Drew. She was trying to control what a child might expose. That pressure made Willow more brittle, more defensive, more quietly threatening. Her kindness towards Scout became layered with unease. Her reassurances became sharper. The whole household turned into a delicate machine built around suppressing suspicion. Drew remained trapped in a haze he could not explain. Willow became increasingly frantic beneath the surface, and Scout grew more certain that something was deeply wrong because the harder Willow tried to smooth everything over, the less believable she became. In the end, Scout acted because fear pushed her there. She could not stand by and watch Drew drift further away while the adults pretended nothing was wrong. When she interrupted Willow at exactly the wrong moment, the polished illusion cracked. The interruption was enough to create a rupture, enough for Drew to sense something beneath the surface, enough for Willow to feel panic stab through her control. Scout, frightened but determined, carried what she knew to Alexis, and that was the point where Willow's private deception began transforming into a crisis that could consume everyone around it. Alexis did not need perfect evidence to understand danger when it arrived wearing the face of domestic care. She saw the fear in Scout, heard the urgency, and recognized the pattern almost immediately. The details were incomplete, but the truth beneath them was clear enough. A woman inside the home had begun using care as a disguise for domination, and a child had been forced to become the witness. For Alexis, that realization was infuriating not only because Drew had been violated, but because Scout had been dragged into an emotional environment no child should have to navigate. Alexis knew what it meant when love became controlling, when protection became an excuse to take away someone else's agency. The more she considered Willow's behavior, the more she understood that this was no temporary lapse in judgment. It was a pattern, and patterns do not stop on their own. If Alexis moves against Willow, the emotional explosion will be brutal, because Willow's greatest weakness is not exposure itself. It is the collapse of the identity she is hidden behind. She can endure blame, but she cannot endure being forced to see herself clearly. Once that process begins, she will not surrender quietly. She will deny, rationalize, and fight, because the truth threatens to destroy not only her future, but the story she has told herself about who she is. While that secret is on the verge of coming apart, Jason is being dragged into a far more public reckoning. His confession that he shot Cullum to protect Rocco was never going to end with admiration. Jason has always lived by a code that puts action before explanation. If someone he loves is in danger, he moves. He absorbs the consequences later. In his mind, protecting Rocco justified everything. That was the simplicity he clung to when he confessed. But real life rarely preserves that kind of moral clarity. Once the admission is made, the consequences spread outward in ways even Jason cannot control. Prison is no longer a threat in the distance. It becomes a real, looming endpoint, and that reality changes the emotional meaning of his sacrifice. He may have acted to save Rocco, but the result is not relief. It is emotional wreckage. Rocco cannot process Jason's choice as noble protection. Instead, he feels crushed by it. The idea that a man could shoot someone for his sake leaves him with a guilt too heavy for someone his age to carry. He did not ask to be defended that way. He did not want his safety tied to violence, yet now he has to live with the knowledge that Jason may lose everything because of a choice made in his name. The adults around him try to explain it away, to frame Jason as loyal, brave, necessary, but those explanations only deepen Rocco's confusion. Their version of love feels frightening now. It feels like a force that destroys people and then demands gratitude. That emotional conflict starts changing him. He becomes quieter, more withdrawn, more suspicious of the people who claim they are protecting him. He no longer sees love as safety. He sees it as something dangerous, something that leaves damage in its wake. That wound begins tearing at his connection with Britt. She wants to help him, comfort him, keep him from collapsing under the emotional burden of Jason's confession. But Rocco is drifting away from everyone tied to the act, and Britt cannot stop that drift simply by being kind. The pain between them grows because it comes from different directions. Rocco wants distance from the entire situation, from the adults, from the violence, from the heavy expectations of how he should feel. Britt wants him to hold on, to keep trusting, to avoid letting shame harden him into someone unreachable. Their bond begins to crack not because they stop caring, but because trauma is now sitting between them, shaping every conversation and every silence. Jason's confession was supposed to contain the damage. Instead, it has created a new emotional fracture that may outlast any legal consequences. For Jason, prison represents more than punishment. It represents helplessness. A man like Jason knows how to act, intervene, sacrifice, absorb danger. He does not know how to sit still while the people he loves unravel outside his reach. That may be the cruelest part of what is coming. He will not only lose his freedom, he will lose the ability to be useful, and usefulness has always been the foundation of his identity. He will know that Rocco is breaking under guilt, that Britt is struggling to hold things together, that enemies are watching his absence like vultures waiting for weakness. His silence may still look like stoic strength to others, but underneath it is the agony of a man realizing that the choice he made to save a child may have emotionally damaged that child in ways he cannot fix. At the same time, Marco's death is sending another shockwave through Port Charles. His funeral is not going to bring peace. It is going to gather grief, suspicion, and rage into one room and dare them not to explode. For Sidwell, Marco's death is an insult as much as a loss. Grief does not soften him. It sharpens him. He cannot bear the idea that someone struck this close and left him powerless to stop it. That helplessness burns hotter than sorrow. It pushes him toward revenge because revenge feels active, and action is easier to survive than grief. He begins approaching Marco's death not as something to mourn, but as something to answer. That mindset makes him more dangerous than ever, because once someone decides their grief deserves blood, the line between justice and obsession disappears. Lucas is pulled into a different kind of torment. His grief turns inward first, becoming a storm of memory, regret, and terrible unanswered questions. He replays past moments and searches them for warning signs he might have missed. The pain of losing Marco is sharpened by uncertainty, because uncertainty keeps grief open. When whispers begin suggesting Sonny may have had something to do with Marco's death, Lucas is torn apart. He does not want to believe it, but he cannot dismiss it either. That is the trap Sonny's reputation creates. Years of violence have made him believable as a killer even before proof appears. Lucas becomes trapped between sorrow and suspicion, and the emotional cost of that tension begins changing him. He does not want revenge, but grief has a way of making certainty seductive. If Sonny is guilty, then Lucas has somewhere to put his pain. If Sonny is innocent, then Lucas must remain lost in unanswered grief. That emotional conflict may push him toward choices he would once have rejected. For Sonny, the suspicion itself is a kind of punishment. Whether he killed Marco or not, he is once again forced to confront the reality that his life has made accusations like this easy to believe. His enemies do not have to invent much. They only have to point to his past and let old fears do the rest. That reality enrages him because it means innocence, if he has it, may not matter. Sidwell's grief could easily become a weapon aimed straight at him. Lucas's doubt could turn into open condemnation. The funeral will not bury anything. It will raise questions, harden grudges, and remind Sonny that a man can spend years building power only to discover that his own legend has trapped him inside guilt he cannot escape. In the middle of all this, Brooklyn and Chase receive the kind of news that should feel like light in a dark city. Their approval to become foster parents to baby Phoebe offers the possibility of something good, stable, and worth protecting. Yet even that hopeful development brings fear with it. Brooklyn feels joy immediately, but also terror. She wants to be enough for Phoebe, to create a home defined by warmth rather than chaos, but the intensity of that desire makes her vulnerable. The more she imagines loving this child, the more frightened she becomes of failing. Hope becomes pressure. Joy becomes responsibility. Every dream of motherhood suddenly feels fragile because now there is something real to lose. Chase experiences the approval with equal emotion but a different kind of anxiety. He wants to be dependable, calm, and solid for both Brooklyn and Phoebe, but that desire turns parenthood into a test he is afraid of failing. He sees all the beauty in what they are building, but he also sees how much discipline, patience, and sacrifice it will require. This changes their relationship immediately. Small differences that once felt manageable now carry larger meaning. Brooklyn leads with fierce emotional protection. Chase leads with caution and structure. Neither instinct is wrong, but pressure can turn differences into conflict. Their future together is no longer just romance. It is a responsibility large enough to expose every insecurity they have. That is what makes their storyline quietly moving in contrast to the destruction elsewhere. They are not being pulled apart by murder, manipulation, or revenge. They are being tested by the seriousness of trying to become a real family. Phoebe's arrival forces them to ask whether love is enough, whether they can hold each other through fear instead of letting fear divide them, whether hope can survive in a place where so many families have been broken by secrets and control. Their story carries tenderness but also tension, because the dream they are moving toward demands emotional maturity neither of them can fake. Across all of these lives, one brutal truth keeps repeating itself. Love has stopped behaving like salvation and started behaving like pressure. Willow calls control devotion. Jason calls sacrifice protection. Sidwell calls revenge grief. Lucas calls suspicion the search for truth. Sonny calls outrage self-defense. Brooklyn and Chase call hope a beginning, but even their beginning comes wrapped in fear. That is why Port Charles feels so combustible right now. Everyone believes they are acting for the right reason, yet every choice is pushing them closer to emotional disaster. Soon the walls will start caving in. Scout's courage may expose Willow and force Drew to face the horrifying truth that his weakness was being engineered by someone inside his own home. Alexis may become the spark that turns private manipulation into public reckoning. Jason's confession may send him to prison while leaving Rocco more damaged than protected, and Britt more heartbroken than she can admit. Marco's funeral may transform sorrow into war, with Sonny caught in the center of accusations strong enough to ignite another violent chain reaction. And Brooklyn and Chase may discover that becoming parents means learning how not to let fear poison the very love they are trying to build around Phoebe. In the end, Port Charles is not simply facing scandal. It is facing exposure. The masks are slipping, the children are watching, the dead are demanding answers, the living are running out of excuses. And when the truth finally tears through these fragile lives, the most devastating shock will not be who falls first. It will be the realization that every one of them, in some way, helped create the storm now coming for them.